As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a very special guest for you, Joel Salatin, a full-time farmer in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. He's a third-generation alternative farmer. He returned to farming full-time in 1982 and continued refining and adding to his parents' ideas. His farm services more than 5,000 families, with 10 retail outlets and 50 restaurants depending on them through on-farm sales and metropolitan buying clubs for salad bar beef and pasteurized poultry, egg mobile eggs, pigurator pork, forage-based rabbits, pasteurized turkey, and forestry products, also using relationship marketing. Joel has a degree in English and writes extensively in food magazines such as Stockman Grass Farmer, Acres USA, and Food Shed. And his family's farm, Polyface Incorporated, the Farm of Many Faces, was featured in Smithsonian's Magazine, National Geographic, Gourmet Magazine, countless other radio, television, and print media. He's been profiled on the Lives of the 21st Century series with Peter Jennings on ABC World News. And his grass farm was featured on the New York Times bestseller Omnivore's Dilemma by food writer guru Michael Pollan and award-winning food documentary Food Inc. Joel is also a sought-after conference speaker addressing a wide range of issues, from creating your farm your children will want to making white-collar salary from a pleasant life in the country. And from all the wide-ranging topics across a wide number of audiences that he speaks to, Joel is a revolutionary for common sense in a world gone mad. And his vortex of wisdom is rooted in his family's thriving farm in Virginia and a lifetime of learning, which also draws on generations of experience that he is benefiting from. So, Joel, we're very glad and privileged to have you here on Reluctant Preppers.
I'm thrilled and honored to be with you.
Our focus often is on the individual family member, the individual homeowner, and what they can do to increase their family's self-reliance and resilience and reduce their dependency on fragile systems for supplying for their family's basic necessities. You have one of your talks called The Self-Contained Home, where you talk about how our homes typically require massive infusions of cash to maintain and energize and feed and keep us hydrated, but how you can give us a new way of looking at that so that our homes become a source of producing more than they cost, and also appealing to those who want to be more reliant in their domestic living. So if we could explore some of your concepts for the self-contained home in this broadcast, we'd love to have you share those thoughts with our audience.
Well, sure. Well, thank you so much. And I guess the place to start is with perhaps water. Water is people that are on either a well and septic or a public water where they're buying water and the sewage is going into a utility. A place to start is how to reduce your water use and reduce your sewage, and those all, of course, have impacts on the greater community, and, of course, reduce floodwaters and all that creates stormwater issues and all that for the municipality, which is a good thing to do for neighbors. And so I'm a big believer in, for example, cisterns. You can gutter your roof and get that water into a cistern, at least in states other than California, Colorado, and Western Oregon. I understand that rain barrels are illegal, at least in Colorado, and they looks like they're going to become illegal in Western Oregon. Eastern Oregon, the dry part, which is, of course, silly because the way to handle that, if people are looking for an apologetic, how do you get through these things, is the simple question: how's the best way for humans to participate with raindrops? I mean, is there any participatory room for humans to interact with raindrops? And I suggest that there is. We can either encourage them to run downhill as fast as possible and get away from us, or we can encourage them to slow down and stay as close to where they drop for as long as possible so that they can be used through a labyrinth of multiple uses as they gradually trickle downhill. Now, it doesn't take you don't have to be a hydrologist or an agronomist or an ecologist, scientist to understand that it's a good thing to slow raindrops down in their gravitational move downhill. That it hydrates. It ultimately hydrates the whole system to hold raindrops up high. And so guttering the roof, going to a cistern approach, using your water, and then you simply replumb a little bit of your plumbing so that you don't put potable water in a toilet, and now you can stop your sewage by your water consumption and your sewage, by 50%. Those are huge savings, and kind of, speaks to the whole need of water.
Still on the topic of water, capturing rainwater into a cistern for reuse, such as gray water for flushing toilets or that sort of use in the home, or for watering small gardens, that sort of thing. But beyond that, what are your thoughts on people's overdependence on municipal water supply and the water quality? Just a week ago, we had a major national news story came out about the greater Toledo area in Ohio, where there was a contamination from a agricultural and other runoff into Lake Erie, causing huge algae blooms, which caused microtoxin to be developed that then contaminated the greater Toledo water supply, and 500,000 people affected, where they didn't have a reliable source to fall back on. So for a homeowner who wants to reduce their fragility of their dependence on that, besides the obvious of just storing some cache of bottled water or barrels of water, something like that, are there other considerations that people should look to in terms of either wells or purification systems that they should have for their home?
Well, yes. Look, one of the reasons that I'm such a fan of cisterns, they're historically, throughout the eons of civilization, they are perhaps the single most common way to store water. It was easier to get water into a cistern, for example, than to dig a well, and without pipes, back before the days of cheap piping, on-site cisterns allowed water to be stored that you could actually see. And one of the problems with wells is that you can't see down there. There can be pollution you don't see, and happens before you realize it. The well can go dry in a drought, and you don't realize that the aquifer is going down until suddenly you have muddy water, and when you have muddy water, you're suddenly, now you're in trouble. But so are other people, so they're all calling well drillers to come out and dig a new well, and suddenly you're 12 months out. So I'm a huge believer in water, what I call water redundancy. Interestingly, when you go, if you ever travel to, for example, Australia, which of course is it's a dry continent, but I mean even in the middle of Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, the great big cities, every single house has 5,000 to 20,000 gallon cisterns. Many of them are hidden by bushes, or they got vines growing up over them to keep them, cool and hidden. But every single house has it, and it's amazing how much water comes off of a roof. In a 31-inch rainfall area, roughly 20 gallons of water per year is collected on every square foot. We just built a new intern housing, and we put in a 15,000 gallon cistern, and you wouldn't believe the water that gushes off that roof. Most of the times, the problem is not that an area doesn't get enough rain. The problem is that it doesn't hold the rain on rain events when they come. And so, if you can hold those, that's why I like to talk about raindrops. If you can hold those raindrops near where they fall, you can use them a lot of times. In now rural America, I don't know how many of your listeners are in actually rural America, but with fracking and pesticide, herbicide, and things like that going on, there are things going on in the aquifers that are very hard to discern, and so cisterns are big, and I promote cisterns. I'd like to see a cistern economy. I mean, I go to Australia, seems like a couple times a year, and cisterns there are a quarter of the cost. It costs a quarter of the price to store a gallon of water in Australia as it does in the U.S. Why? Because we simply don't have a thriving cistern industry. If we had a thriving cistern industry in this country, the price for cisterns would be as low as it is in Australia, which is roughly a quarter the price that it is here. Fascinating.
So note to our listeners, as Fabian Calvo mentioned about find your passion and find other streams of income, as Jerry Robinson also points out, there's a clue from our current guest Joel Salatin that there's a need for a cistern industry in the United States. So if that sparks your interest, look into it, and there's a niche there.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, how many people are scared about water quality with pipelines and fracking and all this stuff going on? I mean, this is a perfect solution to that kind of vulnerability. It's not a vulnerability to quantity, it's a vulnerability to quality.
And also, even with rainwater captured into a cistern, there could be atmospheric pollutants that would be of concern. But you had mentioned possible uses for that water that might be less sensitive, such as separated into a separate non-potable system to reduce your other home use of drinking water.
Absolutely. I mean, most of the water that we use in the home, goodness, I don't know what the percentage is, but certainly, 98% of the water we use in the home doesn't have to be potable. I mean, actually drinkable. I mean, you can actually shower in water. You can certainly, poop into water, and you can wash clothes in water that you might not want to drink, but it's certainly okay for that.
When it comes to purifying water, do you have any recommendations?
Well, sure. There are all sorts of everything from glorified swimming pool filters through sand filters. On our well, for example, we have a UV filter. There's on the hunt camp where we put in a great big where the interns, that we call it the hunt camp. They're hunting for the truth. We have a flush system, so your gutter comes down, and instead of going directly into the cistern, what's called the first flow of water, and it might have some twigs or bird poop or whatever on it, that goes into the gutter comes into a T and flows into this, this column, this like 6-inch PVC column that has a little hole in the bottom of it. It gushes in there, takes that first, like 20 gallons off the roof, and then when it fills up, then the water flows over the top and down into the cistern. Then between rain events, this this kind of ballast slowly drains out into a garden or a raised bed or something. You want to use that water too, and then it's clean for the next rain event. So yeah.
Well, turning our attention from water to food, what are your recommendations for people wanting to increase their self-reliance and resilience on producing food or having more options for their food supply?
Well, I think number one, especially if you're anywhere north of Florida, mid-Mississippi, Houston, Texas, which is most of the U.S. If you have any cold at all in the winter, if you're using any heat, any petroleum type heat or wood or whatever heat in the winter, the first thing is to put a solarium on the side of your house. Well, you say, well, what does that do with food? Well, the beauty of a solarium is that it allows you to get passive solar heat to heat your house, and it gives you a place to grow vegetables in the wintertime. And of course, you can grow vegetables in there in the summertime as well. So when you start talking about greatest marginal reaction, greatest kick for the effort, a solarium is absolutely one of the hottest bangs for the buck in the whole deal, because it combines passive solar energy gain with off-season food production. And in my opinion, every single home, every single building in North America, north of what I mentioned, should have a solarium on it for that reason. I mean, think of the petroleum that's used. If all the petroleum that's used right now to truck lettuce and spinach and Swiss chard from California and Florida to Maine and Minnesota and Indiana and Ohio in the wintertime were put instead into plastic and Lexan for solariums on the side of our buildings in these northern areas, not only could we shut the trucks down, we wouldn't need the trucks, we wouldn't need that petroleum, we wouldn't need the highways, but we would have instead taken this bonanza of petroleum, and instead of creating a 2,000-mile fragile petroleum-dependent food system, instead we would be leaving a legacy for our grandchildren of on-site, real-time energy and food independence. It's not like it's a sin to use petroleum. What it's a sin to do is to squander this blessing on something that creates more dependency and fragility instead of investing it in something that creates more resiliency and less petroleum use.
Additional thoughts on food productions.
Yeah.
That's one area of specialty for you.
Yeah. Solariums are certainly, my number one thing. I mean, we have a house that was built in 1780, and it has a state-of-the-art cedar-built solarium on the side of it. It's beautiful. It looks beautiful. It's wonderful. And this is a retrofit on a 250-year-old house. Okay, so it can be done anytime, anywhere, today, right now, and they're not that expensive. I mean, and don't be afraid to get a good one. I mean, ours cost a little, but they're so valuable. Secondly, if you have any yard at all, front yard, backyard, whatever, edible landscaping. I mean, from nut and fruit trees to raised beds to whatever. The idea is to, instead of having a lawnmower, turn your whatever space you have into productive capacity.
Any suggestions for people who, like us, are dealing with deed restrictions from their homeowners association that outlaw gardening?
Yeah, move. I mean, I wish I had an answer for everybody. I mean, I had a lady in Texas that had to pay a fine to her homeowners association because they had a prohibition on farming, and she had the unmitigated gall to grow 2 tomato plants in her flower bed and had to pay a fine because she was farming. That's unspeakable. I don't have words to describe how asinine, ludicrous. I could go down to thesaurus, but it's obscene. It's obscene that we have that kind of snobbish elitism in these homeowners associations, that they would outlaw, clotheslines, the ultimate solar dryer, and then that they would outlaw vegetable gardens and things like that. I know that there's a sense that they're dirty, but I guess if you can't make a case to the homeowners association, get the rules changed, then I guess I'd put the house on the market and try to move somewhere. I mean, sometimes that becomes the best option, is just going to a different place that's easier to become. Some places are very hard to become self-reliant in. They just are, and so sometimes you have to just move. Now, that being said, think about the things that you can do incognito. For example, there are now, I'm sure you're familiar with aquaponics. I'm just a huge fan of aquaponics, not aquaponics that are hydroponic, but aquaponics that use a pebble medium at least, so that the medium, the growing medium, actually can have surface area to get bacteria and fungi and things like that on it to more approximate a soil system. But there are home aquaponics systems now, turnkey. You get a kit, and the thing will produce all of the greens that you need. Not all your green beans and things like that, but at least all of your salad greens for a family of 4, and enough fish to have fish once a month. In a footprint no bigger than a refrigerator. So, rip out the TV, tear out the entertainment centers, and put in your little aquaponics system. You don't have to ask, you don't have to tell, nobody has to see it, and it's in your home. You can. Another of my favorites is get rid of the dog, the cat, the gerbil, and the hamster, and the parakeet, and put in a couple of chickens. That can be done in your house, in a condominium. They're very enjoyable, and they eat all your kitchen scraps. Instead of sending your kitchen scraps out to the curb for the garbage guys to pick up and take to the landfill, just feed them to the chickens, and the chickens give you eggs, and now you have eggs. You don't have to buy eggs, and you don't have to throw away the trash. I mean, 75% of everything that goes in the landfills in the U.S. is decomposable biomass. That's evil. It's immoral. It's to take this biomass, solar energy, whether it's a cucumber peel or a junk piece of furniture, a chair or something. But to take that decomposable biomass and send it to the landfill where it's going to last for, who knows, millennia, it is an assault on the beautiful carbon-centric solar to biomass, to life, to death, to decomposition, solar to biomass. It's an assault to that cycle that's supposed to be occurring.
So are you advocating composting as well then?
Absolutely, and you can get little earthworm, red wiggler vermicomposting bins that go under your sink, composting on site, pot gardens, and everybody laughs when I say pot gardens, and yes, I'm fine if you want to grow pot too, but container gardens, like in pots on your patio. You'd be surprised if you go to, for example, a Mother Earth News fair. They now have 4 of them around the country. Next one's coming up in Pennsylvania. If you go to a Mother Earth News fair, you will see, numerous, people who sell urban patio gardening kits. They're stackable. Some use packed compost, but they look like little Japanese pagodas. They stack up, and you can drip some water in the top, drip, and out of the edges of all the pagodas, stacked pagodas, are your plants. And the roots extend down into the middle, the column that's packed with, some compost and soil and perlite or whatever. And on literally a corner of a patio, you can grow, 50 plants that are, 10 feet tall. The creativity in this kind of urban farming infrastructure now is just out of this world, and so we need to jump on that. Don't think that because I live in an apartment condo or whatever that I can't be a part of this. I think too, part of that self-contained home, part of that idea is, when we talk about food, this may be something that a lot of people don't think about, but some of it too is reestablishing a larder. We don't use that word anymore. Larder is kind of something you read in Little House on the Prairie books and things like that, but a larder was essentially a huge pantry for storing foodstuffs. And it used to be, 80 years ago, if I went to your city and said, where's the food in this city? it would all be in everybody's domestic larder, in their pantries, in their kitchens. It'd be potatoes and carrots and canned goods and lacto-fermented and pickles and sauerkraut crocks and all sorts of cool stuff. Today, if people don't go to the supermarket at least 3 times a week, there's nothing to eat. The food is stored in a Costco warehouse 2,000 miles away. That is a very, very fragile system that depends on world peace. It depends on all the parts of the distribution chain being in harmony. That all the Teamsters are happy and the dock workers are happy and the petroleum suppliers are happy and the refrigeration mechanics are happy.
And there's a free-flowing financial markets with credit being available to everybody along the way.
That's right. And, you don't have to be a huge student of history to know that times of disruption are generally, there's many of them that are non-ecological, that are strictly social and economic, as they have anything to do with ecology. So even in good times, things can be pretty fragile, vulnerable. But if you use your house, if you buy in volume, buy in bulk, and you use your home as your food warehouse, that fundamentally changes not only the cost of what you're buying, because now you can buy it for half price because you're buying it unprocessed and in season, but you're also in charge of all of the parts in the chain that that we become very concerned about. Why is it that half the stuff you buy in the store, even anything ready to eat, has high fructose corn syrup, MSG, stabilizers, dyes, preservatives, taste enhancers, all this stuff? It doesn't have to be. And when you have preserved by dehydration or canning or lacto-fermenting, whole foods, real, where you get actual cucumbers, from a farmer that or you can, for example, chicken or beef or pork from a farmer that and your larder is stacked with all these cans of anything from venison to pork to chicken to whatever. That is shelf stable for years and years. You know exactly where it came from, what went into it. And then think about this: when you lie down with your beloved at night, now you don't about where tomorrow's meal is coming from. You don't have to worry about what did some nameless, faceless person do in some huge processing factory tomorrow's dinner. What drug residues are in there? You don't have to worry about that. Instead, you're lying down proximate to this wonderful cornucopia of food that you've participated in acquiring and preparing, preserving, packaging, and it becomes a balm for your emotions, it becomes a spiritual thing that you don't have to fear now. You can go forward in faith. Yes, we've got this larder full of food here. Things can collapse for 6 months, and we're going to eat just fine. And when Teresa sends me shopping, I don't go to the supermarket. I take a list down to the basement where she's got hundreds and hundreds of prepared, canned stuff, and pickles and sauerkraut and whatever else. And okay, here's the list. I bring up, green beans and applesauce and pickled beets and sauerkraut and whatever, and that's the way I go shopping. And so when there's a snowstorm or there's a power failure or whatever, it doesn't bat an eye. We just go to the basement and keep eating.